Well, if we're thinking about the key issues, I think there are, in fact, three key issues with regards to the perceptions around Chinese investments. And I'll focus here on the international perceptions rather than the domestic perceptions. But the three issues are basically strategic stroke military issues, being the first one. The second one, I think, are economic issues. And the third one I would describe as governance issues, being a combination of human rights issues, labor standards, and environmental regulation, along with transparency aspects. So if we take the strategic and sort of military issues as the first set of issues, the concern or the perception, I think, from some of the international community is that Chinese investments are actually sort of leading to what they call dual use infrastructure, particularly dual use ports, in the sense that they are not just economic but intended for military use as well. Certainly, Chinese investment in Sri Lanka has been high and continues to be such. There's no doubt about that. In the last year, in the 2017 year, we saw actually a record year for foreign direct investment in Sri Lanka, which was 1.9 billion in the year, the highest ever. And of that, about 900 million came from China, about sort of 600-ish from mainland China and another 300 from Hong Kong. So that's certainly a high level of investment. Of that 900 million, about I think 300 million was payment for the Hambantota port deal. As to whether that is sort of a dual-use facility, certainly the government, the Sri Lanka government, has been at pains to express that it has made clear to China and that China has agreed that this would not be a dual-use facility. So that's the stance of the government. There's no doubt that any level of high investment brings with it strategic influence. That's the case in the private sector as much as it is in the public sector. But strategic influence, covers a wide range of types of influence. It's unclear as to the extent to which that would extend to military influence. The second set of issues are the economic issues. The perception and the narrative at the moment is very much around what is being described as debt trap diplomacy. The Chinese investments, Chinese economic involvement in Sri Lanka, brings with it a sort of a trap with it. Certainly, Sri Lanka has a high debt to GDP ratio for a developing country, around 80%. The total debt is around 69 to 70 billion. However, the figures reveal that it's around 3 to 4 billion of that that is debt owed to China. So we're talking about about 5.5%, which is roughly the same as what Sri Lanka owes to Japan. The majority of Sri Lanka's debt is domestically, as well as to actors other than China. That's the situation at the moment. Of course, one needs to look carefully about the terms of the debt and how it evolves. But that's the indication of what we have now. The third set of issues is really related to the first two issues and the perceptions around that, and that's the governance issues, and particularly around transparency, but also around rights, human rights, labor rights, environmental standards. there is perhaps some concern, perhaps more domestically even than internationally, about what the Chinese investments mean for Sri Lanka in terms of governance. That's something that, unlike the strategic and economic issues, the international community has been a little less vocal on, but in fact perhaps it is actually more important, at least as important, to think about what the standards are going to be around Chinese investment, and I would say there's a need for both countries have responsibility. I mean, China and Sri Lanka have a responsibility to work out those standards together, and most importantly, for it to be transparent, so that it can be evaluated in a consensual way, including by civil society in Sri Lanka. Transparency would really also help to address perception issues around the strategic aspects and the economic aspects, because so long as there is this lack of transparency, then you do get the sort of misconceptions and misperceptions persisting, and they will persist, around the strategic and the economic issues as well.